Greetings. This is the one you've known as Jesus the Christ. This is part 1 of chapter 8 of my book, Awakening Love. Few wiser words have ever been spoken than these from Proverbs. As a man thinketh, so is he. Many live in a hell of their own making without realizing their responsibility in this. And because they don't realize this, they remain stuck. I will do my best in this chapter to help you see that this is unnecessary. Life can be challenging, but it need not be a hell. Hell is supposedly a place of eternal torment. It's something that you, your divine self, would never wish on anyone, but the ego might. Because the ego is devoid of love, it has no empathy and no remorse and no moral compass. Its only compass is its desires, and those get the ego into trouble. So the ego has dreamed up a place, hell, where it threatens to put people, or put itself to keep itself in check. The ego uses fear to intimidate and manipulate others, despite the fact that love works much better. But what does the ego know about love? It knows only fear. Hell is a reflection of the ego's hatred, self-hatred, selfishness, and intolerance. Hell is everyone's worst nightmare. It's absent of love, sympathy, compassion, and forgiveness, with no way out. It's what you get when you take love, compassion, and forgiveness out of the picture. Fortunately, love, compassion, and forgiveness are very much a part of the picture of life on earth, and fortunately, your true nature is not at all like the ego. It's because you're not like the ego that hell is your worst nightmare. A world or realm without love would be horrible indeed for beings like yourselves who are of love. The unhappiness, despair, and cruelty would be unbearable. And yet, societies can devolve into a hell of sorts. When the ego is allowed to reign, that is what happens. What keeps the ego in check? Besides your true nature and inborn moral compass, which points you toward love, the ego keeps itself in check to some extent through the superego, which is an aspect of the ego that judges and punishes the ego with shame and guilt, an interesting development in human evolution. Through negative self-talk, shaming, and self-hatred, you judge and punish yourself internally for your mistakes and the things your ego causes you to do. You are so stupid, how could you do that? Or, you're getting nowhere spiritually, are the types of things you say to yourself. This is the superego. The superego is what believes in using punishment and cruelty to reform itself and others. The superego is no more evolved than the very primitive ego that gave birth to it. The problem with shame is that it's neither the best deterrent to bad behavior nor the best teaching device. Shame is unloving and hurtful, and there's a price to pay for shame, and that is self-esteem. When you shame someone, as the ego does, that person feels bad about himself or herself and remains vulnerable to further ego manipulation. Shame keeps people in the egoic state of consciousness, in a state of negativity. To truly reform and transform people, they need support in moving out of the egoic state of consciousness. The first thing they need is love and forgiveness from others. This makes it easier for them to forgive themselves and to connect with the love within themselves. Then it will be impossible for them to behave badly. This is why forgiveness is so important and such an important tool for personal and societal transformation. Forgiveness allows people to begin again anew and reconnect with their innate loving nature rather than stay stuck in the egoic state of consciousness because of guilt, shame, or low self-esteem. Once people are connected with the love of their true nature, they begin to love themselves, and then they'll behave lovingly toward others. As a society, you must help people end the vicious cycle of self-hatred by forgiving them and giving them skills to improve themselves and become more loving. The first skill to offer them is meditation. Teach them to meditate. This is how people can most easily connect with their true nature and see the truth about the voice in their head. Once they're on this road, transformation is possible. No one is so wayward that they can't be uplifted by helping them connect with their innate loving nature. There is a solution to much of the crime and violence in society. The other means of uplifting people is attending to their basic needs if those needs are not being met. Love them by giving them what they need to be healthy members of society. Do they need food? Give it to them. Do they need training or education? Give it to them. Do they need emotional healing or health care? Give it to them. This is obvious, isn't it? If people are committing crimes because they lack the basic necessities of life, then society has failed them. Serving those in your society this way is just good policy and good for society. If you don't, you'll pay the price through crime, incarceration, unrest, and unhappiness. Whatsoever you do to the least of my brethren you do to me, means whatever good or harm you do to another, you do to yourself. Others are you in another disguise. You take care of them because that's how you would want to be treated. You love one another without exceptions, because there are no exceptions. Everyone is God. Everyone is your very own self, your divine self in disguise. People are healed and uplifted by one thing, love. Society is improved only through love, not through punishment or unequal treatment. Love is generous of spirit, caring, and compassionate. Love is also just and wise. Love gives, and it is wise enough to give what is needed and no more. You are always being guided in your giving by your intuition, inner wisdom, and the good feeling of rightness. The reason given for not giving to those in need is often that giving will spoil them or make them lazy or weak. It's true that giving inappropriately or giving too much to others can lead to dependency or lack of self-sufficiency. Unfortunately, that reasoning is too often just an excuse to be selfish and unconcerned about others. Be your brother's keeper. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Give, if only to ensure that you also will be given to in your time of need, in keeping with the law of karma. When people do give, they discover that giving is its own reward, and they'll continue to give simply because it feels good. And why does giving feel good? Because it's the right thing to do. By all means do what feels good, not in the sense of physical pleasures, but what feels good intrinsically. Love feels good, and this good feeling is part of your inner guidance system. I said that it's impossible to love yourself if you believe that you are the ego and if you're behaving like the ego, since the ego behaves badly. When you begin to give more and love more, all this changes, because this is doing the opposite of what the ego does. The reward of giving is not only that you make others feel good, which you surely do, but that you make yourself feel good about yourself. This last part is important. You make yourself feel good. You have the power to make yourself feel good and to do the things that result in loving yourself. You have always had this power, But most people don't use it to their fullest. They're too busy making themselves feel bad, creating their living hell. Just as life can be hell, life can also be heaven, depending on what you're thinking and believing. So we return to the chapter's theme, as a man thinketh, so is he. And you could add, as a man thinketh, so does he feel. Your thoughts cause you to be a certain way and feel a certain way. So let's explore this further. It all begins with a thought. A thought arises in your mind. You didn't put that thought there. You didn't call it up. You didn't choose it from lots of other thoughts. It just showed up unbidden. You had nothing to do with that. Where did that thought come from? It came from your unconscious mind. Although the unconscious mind is mysterious, it isn't completely unknown territory. People have known about the unconscious mind for a long time. It's a storehouse. It stores memories and all sorts of information and conditioning you've gathered throughout this and all your other lifetimes. It also houses the collective unconscious, which stores impressions gained from humanity's history. And it stores the programming that is the ego. But that's not all. The unconscious mind is also a portal to the soul. What I mean by this is that the soul's lessons and the soul's plan, including one's personality, karma, talents, psychological issues, wounds, and proclivities from past lives, are part of the programming stored in the unconscious mind. In short, the unconscious mind stores information from one's current life, past lives, and humanity's history, as well as the soul's programming and the ego's programming. Just as your computer is programmed to perform specific tasks, you have programming that causes you to respond to life in habitual and programmed ways. This is all to say that you are not in control of what thoughts arise from the unconscious mind and appear as the voice in your head. This is determined by forces beyond you, some of which are benevolent and some not, for there is one other aspect to the unconscious mind that must be mentioned: negative influence by non-physical entities. Just as those guiding you work with your unconscious mind to help and heal you, negative non-physical entities can also influence you through your unconscious mind if you're in a negative state. This is all the more reason to keep your thoughts as positive as possible, which I'll say more about shortly. I mention these negative entities because it's important that you understand that some of the most ugly, hateful, and violent thoughts you have come from beyond you and beyond your ego, from non-physical entities who've lost their way and are divorced from love. I hesitate to use the word possessed because it's so highly charged, but these negative entities can use the unconscious mind to cause people to do things that they would never do were it not for their influence. This influence is largely through the voice in the head, which arises from the unconscious mind. These entities are not to be feared, as they are not powerful, but they cause many to hate themselves and even harm themselves and others. They're most certainly involved in most suicides and violent crimes and other sociopathic behavior. Eventually, these negative entities will see the light, literally and figuratively, and return to love, as everyone does. If this phenomenon were more widely understood, there would be more compassion for criminal behavior and better tools for dealing with it. As it stands, the negativity heaped by society on those influenced in this way makes this a real win for negative entities who want nothing more than to promulgate fear and hatred in human society. If you'd like to understand more about this phenomenon and how to work with such negativity, I refer you to this author's book, Getting Free, moving beyond negativity and limiting beliefs. The point I want to make here now is that your hateful and extremely negative thoughts are literally not yours. Your darkest thoughts are not coming from your ego, but from beyond you. They're being planted in your unconscious mind by those who wish to manipulate you and wreak havoc in your world. There's no reason to feel bad about having such thoughts, or even about the thoughts that come from your own ego. They mean nothing about you. Your true nature is love, and nothing these entities do can change that. As I said, these entities aren't powerful, except if you believe them and do their bidding. Thank you for being open to this message. I am with you always.